So, we will take a few questions from the local press. The lights are so bright, it is unfortunate. I can't see you, so you just have to kind of raise your hand and shout out your question. But I will say that I want one of these great local journalists who've been focused on this fraud issue. Let's start with you, sir. Go ahead. We like this guy.
Want to know that these fraudsters are going to be held accountable. But I tell everybody that it comes.
I'll repeat it for you.
You today coming validates the fraud. Yeah. But it's up to the rest of us to make sure it gets fixed. What is your advice to the people of Maine and how they hold their elected leaders accountable?
So the question for those of you who couldn't hear is, we all know there's a fraud problem in Maine. We all know we want to fix the fraud problem in Maine. What advice do I have? What are the concrete steps that we can take to actually ensure that the fraud stops? Let me give you a few answers. And one, I got to be honest, it's on me, and it's on the Federal Department of Justice, it's on the leadership of the United States government, is when we find somebody like Ms. Muhammad who's committing fraud against the American people, we've got to show up and arrest her and try to send her to prison. It's very simple. There's got to be accountability. Because here, one of the things I learned, and I was shocked by this, is that when we have what is defined as low-level fraud, let's say a person defrauds all of you for $1 million. Too many of our Department of Justice leaders under the Biden administration, they said that was too low-level to actually go after. So, I mean, how many of you would like the federal government to hand you $1 million? Yeah. Well, there were fraudsters out there who were getting $1 million of your money, and the government wasn't even paying attention to it. One of the best things that you can do when you go and arrest somebody and throw them in prison when they break the law is, yes, it's justice for that one person, but it also sends a message to all the other fraudsters that we're not going to tolerate this crap anymore. So we have got to get serious, and sir, we have. I promise you that we have. Here's the other thing is the best and most actionable thing that you can do, because you're not going to get help from the governor right now. We all know that. She hasn't taken fraud very seriously. It's funny. She came to Washington last year and did some breakfast with the President of the United States. And when she showed up, what did she talk about? Did she talk about, you know, the issues that matter to workers? Was she talking about jobs and investments in the state of Maine? No, she showed up to advocate for the right of men to play in women's sports. That's what she cared about when she got in front of the President of the United States. Again, I think all of us believe it's crazy that men would want to play in women's sports. I think that's common sense. But here's what I understand even less than that. Even if you think that men should play in women's sports, how is that the issue you care most about as the governor of the state of Maine? It's crazy. It's crazy. So what you all can do is keep your eyes open, okay? I don't have any faith in your local government right now, or I should say your state government, that they're going to fix this problem. But so much, again, of the best stuff that we've gotten on the anti-fraud task force has been from local officials and local citizen journalists. And when I say a citizen journalist, I don't mean a person who went to journalism school. I mean a person with a cell phone who's willing to ask questions of their local leadership and of everybody else in their community. Like, here's the thing. When we really got wind of what was going on in Minneapolis, it was because somebody showed up at the Quality Leering Center. We've got a guy over there. Did you get a good education at the Quality Leering Center, sir? That's not, he said he's a graduate with honors of the Quality Leering Center. I congratulate you, but I don't think it's that hard, if we're being honest with you. But he's the proudest graduate. Look, here's the thing. If you have a daycare center that's receiving millions of dollars of federal tax dollars, and it says it can't even spell the word learning right, maybe you send a message to your local representative, you send a message to Paula Page, or you reach out to us on the Fraud Task Force, the website's right there, and actually make it possible for us to go and investigate this stuff. So keep your eyes and your ears to the ground. There is unfortunately fraud all around us. If we're gonna get at this problem, we're gonna need citizens to take it seriously. I know you are. Let's just keep at it. Thank you.
So, Vice President Vance, Rich McHugh from News Nation. We have been reporting here in Maine since last year on fraud. We've been reporting in Minnesota on fraud. We're seeing prosecutions happen in Minnesota and in California, but some of the things that we're hearing from people and whistleblowers is you have to go to the org structure, the leadership, and that's not happening. How will this administration go after not just the people who are perpetrating it, but the people who are enabling it and overseeing it in the first place?
It's a good question. So, one of the reasons why I raised this question of certain amounts of fraud being so low level that people weren't even looking at it is it's impossible to get to the high level fraudsters unless you're sometimes willing to look at the low level fraudsters too. How many of us have watched a good mob movie? And how do those prosecutions always start? You never start with the boss. You start with the low-level guys who then give you some sense of the criminal enterprise, and then you can go after the high-level fraud and the high-level crime. The fact that we were turning a blind eye to fraud under $1 million meant that we weren't even looking at the people who were sitting on top of some of these fraud rings. And we do see already signs in Minnesota, for example, of some very sophisticated stuff. Sometimes I see these fraud rings and I think to myself, sir, if you just started like a real business, you might actually be a halfway productive citizen, but instead you put those talents into fraud, and so we're going to put all our talents to throw you in prison if that's how you're going to approach that. And that's the most important thing, is you've got to be willing to go everywhere and look at all fraud, or you're never going to be able to look at the high-level guys. Because very often what will happen is you've got 10 people who are skimming $1 million off the top. And then they kick up a few $100,000 to somebody above them, and then it turns out that when you look at the whole network, you've got a lot of people who are making millions and millions and millions of dollars for every low-level guy that's making $500,000 or something like that. So our approach has been to go everywhere, to look at everything, and that's how we're going to get the fraudsters. And trust me, we are going to get them. We already have gotten a lot of them, and we're going to keep our pedal to the gas for the next 2.5 years. Next question.
Brittany McCatton from WABI in Bangor, wondering what the Mills administration and the state government could do today to begin working with you on this issue.
Yeah, so I'll give you two the question was, what could the local administration, the state administration do to help work with us on this issue? I'll give you two very concrete examples. So first of all, one of the biggest problems that we have in Medicaid fraud is, again, because these programs are state administered, the states have to actually empower their anti-fraud people to look into what's going on. So we have what's called every 50 state, or all 50 states should have what's called an MFCU, a Medicare Fraud Control Unit. And we need the local governor to just empower that Medicare Fraud Control Unit to look at the fraud, to prosecute it, and then, of course, they can ask the federal government if they reach a case that's so big they need a little help. We would be happy to help them. We just need the local governor to work with us a little bit better. Exactly. And unfortunately, I just don't get the sense, having talked to her, my people have talked to her, I don't get the sense that the state governor here is particularly interested in working on this problem. But I'll give you another example. So we know one of the biggest drivers of fraudulent federal benefits is SNAP. It's the food stamps program, okay? So again, this is a program which actually has even less federal oversight, as shocking as that is, even less federal oversight than the state Medicaid program. So here's how food stamps works. Every month or every couple of weeks, the state of Maine, the state of California, all 50 states, I'm not joking about this, will submit a bill to the federal government and say, this is how much we spent on food stamps. There's no verification of a single person. There's no confirmation that, let's say a person was on food stamps and passed away, that person has stopped receiving benefits. There's no confirmation that you don't have illegal aliens receiving food stamp benefits. So I always laugh a little bit when I hear people like Gavin Newsom or Janet Mills say, we don't let illegal aliens access the food stamp program. And I say, how do you know? And so the number one thing that I would like them to do is to help us set up the systems to where if you're getting food stamps, we confirm that, number one, you're eligible, you actually need the program. Number two, you're not an illegal alien. And number three, you're still alive. It is not a high barrier to demand that Janet Mills confirms that the people who are receiving food stamps are actually breathing. I'm a pretty conservative guy, but I think that's a pretty low bar for Janet Mills to clear. We would love to work with her on that. We encourage her to do so.
ABC 7 and Fox 22 News here in Bangor.
In your remarks, as you mentioned, the administration has warned that states could lose federal funding if they don't aggressively prosecute Medicaid fraud. If funding is cut, how will the federal government ensure that low-income Mainers, particularly those in rural areas, are still receiving necessary medical care?
Well, let me say two things. First of all, there is no administration in American history that has done more to make secure and safe and dependable the rural healthcare system than the Trump administration. In the Working Families Tax Cuts bill, now, you all think of that primarily as a tax piece of legislation because it was, but do you know that there were tens of billions of dollars put into a rural healthcare stabilization funds so that all the rural hospitals and clinics that were closing under the Biden administration, so that we could make sure those clinics are able to stay open for the people in Maine who need them. That was a very, very important part of the legislation and something I'm very proud of. But the second thing I'd say is whether it's Medicaid or any other program, we don't want the people, and we're setting this up so that the people who need these programs and are eligible for them, they're not going to suffer the consequences. We want the fraudsters and we want the bureaucrats who enable the fraud. We want those people to suffer the consequences. So here's a very simple thing is the threat to the Medicaid program. I always think some of these political partisan types get this exactly backwards. The threat to the Medicaid program is not us keeping fraudsters away from the Medicaid program. It's the fraudsters raiding that program to begin with. That's the threat to the Medicaid program. And so what I'd say to anybody who's worried about the Medicaid program, help us fight back against the fraud, because we want low-income people in this state to be able to get the health care benefits they need. But that's not going to happen if the fraudsters steal all the money that should go to the people who actually need it.
Seamus Othot with the Maine Wire. In the recent budget, Janet Mills and the Democrats enshrined essentially protections for fraudsters. If they get their federal funding cut, the state will pay for them. How do you think that can be fought on the federal level without just taking those currently diffuse costs and putting them even more directly onto the Maine taxpayers?
Well, I had not heard of that. Unfortunately, it doesn't shock me. And I think that this is where, when we talk about what can you do, what is my advice to you in order to stop the fraud? Advice number one is throw the people that enable the fraud the hell out of office. They're not worthy of your support, and it's going to keep happening unless we kick them out of office. But the answer is we have a number of tools at the federal government to force compliance with our anti-fraud statutes and anti-fraud provisions. We're working very hard, again, to work with these states, but if the states aren't going to work with us, we're going to force them to comply with the anti-fraud mandate. It's very simple. We're going to use those tools at every step of the way. I don't, frankly, care whether the far-left politicians in this or that state try to protect the fraudsters. We're not going to protect them under the Trump administration, and that is my solemn promise to every person in the state.
Jackie Mundry from WMTW in Portland. It sounds like it's been a challenge to work with the Mills administration on this issue. That's
an understatement.
We have a gubernatorial election coming up in November with primaries in just a couple weeks. Do you think it would be easier to work with a Republican governor? If so, why? And do you plan to endorse any of them? I know a number of them are here today.
Well, first of all, congratulations to those guys. I mean, I've run for political office. I always admire anybody who's willing to put their hat in the ring and try to represent the great people of this state or any other. It's an amazing thing. Thank you all. But I mean, look, what I would say is, obviously I'm a Republican, so I think it's going to be easier to work with some of these Republican candidates. But the simple fact is, it couldn't be harder than it is with Janet Mills. Again, there are a few states, maybe, California, New York, Maine, Minneapolis, or Minnesota. There probably are 5 or 10 states that are just impossible to work with because it's clear they don't want to go after the fraud. Now, I don't know why that is. Part of that could be they're complicit in it themselves, okay? Part of that could be they know that a lot of their donors have gotten rich off the fraud. Part of that could just be laziness, and part of that could be because they honestly, in their hearts, care more about illegal aliens than the people they represent. There's a combination of explanations, but I guarantee you, whoever is the next governor of Maine, it cannot be worse when it comes to anti-fraud than Janet Mills. We'll do one more question, then we'll hit the road.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, for taking questions. I'm Phil Hirschkorn from News Center, Maine. So it turns out that Maine does have a Medicare fraud control unit. You mentioned that a few minutes ago. I'm wondering, you said Maine could be the third worst state after states like California and Minnesota, which have proven tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars in fraud and many federal convictions. So far, what we've heard about from the federal government in Maine is questionable $45 million in the autism services, which you mentioned. We've also heard about $1.7 million in questionable billing by a Somali immigrant-run NGO. My question is,
guys,
what else?
It's all right. Now, I appreciate you all standing up for me, but trust me,
hey, we still have innocent until proven guilty in this country. My question is, what else do you got? What else has your task force flagged that we should be concerned about? Because those amounts are a lot, 46 million, 1.7 million, but they don't really compare to California and Minnesota. What else should we expect from your task force? Thank you.
Let me say a few things. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've got biased reporters in all states. It's okay, trust me. I can handle it. But here's what I'd say. A few things. Number one, you talk about the scale of the fraud being less in Maine than it is in California. Well, California has a population that's much higher than Maine, so that's not necessarily a fair comparison. Number two, we've frankly been at this less long than we have in Maine than in other states. Okay, this is something where I would say, you notice a pattern. And you're right, innocent until proven guilty, but what I've noticed is a pattern that when you see certain types of fraud and certain types of programs, that's the tip of the iceberg. And when I see that autism services fraud in the Medicaid program in the Somali community, but not just that, I see local and state politicians who don't care about policing that fraud, that's the tip of the iceberg. And we're going to find out just how deep that iceberg is, and I suspect, I can't promise, but I suspect we are going to find hundreds of millions of more dollars every single month that we look in the state of Maine, because this is not a state that takes it seriously. And this is the third point and the most important one. I do not actually like having a contentious relationship between the state government and the federal government. We want people to help us find the fraudsters. It goes a lot quicker. It's a lot easier. It requires fewer resources from the federal government, but you find more fraud when you're working with people at the local level. What I find so preposterous about Maine, it's not just that we found tens of millions of dollars of fraud in a relatively small state. It's that we've had no cooperation from the state government. So when I say that the state government, when I say this is the third, maybe the fourth worst state when it comes to fraud, what I mean very simply is that you've got a governor and you've got a set of bureaucrats that don't care about fraud. And all I'm saying is Donald J. Trump and JD Vance, we care about fraud. We care about the people of this state, and we care about your tax dollars going to where it's actually supposed to go.